Thank you again for joining us today. Without further ado, I'll continue the presentation. Our Compliance and Grants Administration Division consists of our Deputy Director, Kenesha London. We have Laura Serenos, our Division Manager, and I myself, Crystal Boyce, who oversees the MWSBE and Pair Play Compliance for single-family activities and public service projects and professional service projects with the Housing and Community Development Department. We have had a lot of changes and a lot of restructuring going on. Currently, our MWSBE team includes Ms. Nicole Joseph, who is an administrative coordinator, and she handles MWSBE and Pair Play portions of compliance requirements. And so at any time throughout any contracts that you may be working on, feel free at any time to contact myself or any of our compliance members. The discussion topics for today's MWSBE session will include policy overview. So for many of you who may not be familiar with the MWSBE policy for the City of Houston, we also will discuss the certification benefits along with commonly used MWSBE terms. We'll also go through a hands-on B2G participation payment tracker requirements and LCP tracker document submissions. That's the portal that we use for any documents and uploading for the contractors. We'll also review contract agreements, the compliance form packets, as well as deviation requests, contractor performance, and the closeout evaluation process. And so at any time throughout any of these areas, if you have a question or if you want to take a conversation off record, feel free to contact me or put your questions in the chat. If we don't respond right away, we'll get to you after the sessions are over and make sure that the responses are shared with all of the participants. The benefits of the MWSBE certification, and so the Office of Business Opportunity is our overseer of the MWSBE program, and so they administer the program, and we're just one of the many departments that also enforce these requirements. And so with the certifications for MWSBE, all of the certification requirements are managed through the Office of Business Opportunity. We encourage you to take advantage of the certification process. We know that this gives you an advantage in the selection process during procurement. And so if you know any contractors that are in the City of Houston that do great work, we definitely encourage you to share the information about the certification with the Office of Business Opportunity. You will receive regular alerts for networking and contracting opportunities. This is something that I definitely look forward to on a regular basis from the Office of Business Opportunity. And so make sure, if you're not already registered with the Office of Business Opportunity, to receive those alerts, that you do so sooner than later. You definitely don't want to miss out on any of these great opportunities with the City of Houston. Your company is listed in the City of Houston's Office of Business Opportunity Directory, which is a public directory that we encourage those contractors that are seeking, work on projects, or even those contractors that are seeking to solicit information about contracts with the City of Houston, or even with our housing projects. And so when we have new projects that come available, new opportunities, we encourage those prime contractors, the developers, to utilize the online directory, because those are the certified firms that can be accredited towards those participation goal requirements on many of our projects. You want to make sure that you understand the Chapter 15 ordinance with the City of Houston. This details and gives us the rule book for what we administer in regards to MWSBE compliance. And a great thing about the certification with the City of Houston Office of Business Opportunity is many entities in surrounding counties will accept the City of Houston certification if you're seeking opportunities, around the City of Houston, or, with other entities or organizations. And so if you have secured that City of Houston certification, it will allow you a step in many other entities with many opportunities that are afforded around the City of Houston. MWSBE policy overview. And so for any of you who may be new to the MWSBE program, the MWSBE program that is enforced by the City of Houston is a program that helps maximize participation of those usually referred to as underutilized, businesses, those who may not, be the first to be used on projects with around the City of Houston. And so we definitely want to make sure that on any procurements that we have, any solicitations that go out through the Housing and Community Development Department, we like to make sure that to the maximum extent that minority women-owned small business enterprises are used in all phases of contract opportunities. And so please make sure that you keep this in mind when you have contracts or new procurements that are coming up, or even when you're just working on, opportunities with the City of Houston. Even if it's, not with the Housing and Community Development Department, we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of the funding and the opportunities. And so with that, we want to make sure that we're extending opportunities to the maximum extent to minority women-owned small business enterprises. Company use MWSBE terms. You'll see general contractor, or you may hear it interchangeably used as a prime contractor. The prime contractor typically is that main contractor. They do the general construction on the project. You'll typically see those contractors solicit information for bids for, subcontractors or lower tier subs that may be performing on the project. And so a general contractor is someone that will be very useful and helpful if there are any new opportunities on the projects. They'll be the ones that typically send out solicitations for opportunity on the project. And so make sure that you stay connected with general contractors, that work with the City of Houston. And as I also mentioned, with the online directory with the Office of Business Opportunity, it includes, general contractors that you'll be able to filter through and look through the system if you're ever, seeking to connect with any general contractors or prime contractors that work on City of Houston project. A subcontractor, of course, that is a contractor that is hired through a general contractor. As I mentioned, that's who you typically see that, perform the great work on our projects. And so we definitely want to make sure if you're not a subcontractor, if you're interested in becoming a subcontractor, to reach out to the Office of Business Opportunity to start that process so that we can get you certified as a subcontractor and vetted through the system. A supplier, a company that supplies products on the projects. So typically you see that on all of our projects. We need suppliers in various phases. With all of the different type of divisions that we have, from single family, multifamily, public facilities, public services. Typically you'll see suppliers on our projects. And so if you know any good suppliers, definitely encourage them to connect with the Office of Business Opportunity and the Housing and Community Development Department so that they can stay abreast of any new opportunities that are coming up. Lower tier subs are typically what you see when a subcontractor has an additional firm that they're utilizing to help complete work on a project. And so that's where you'll see a lower tier sub, and you'll see those if you're familiar with working on our projects with the housing department, or even with the City of Houston, how we're able to tier the subs in B2G. Good faith efforts. This is very huge. It is a big term when you think about the Minority Women-Owned Small Business Enterprise Program. Before you see any goal requirements, you'll always hear good faith efforts. And so you want to make sure if you're performing on a project with the City of Houston that you always document your good faith efforts. And these are the steps that you have taken to meet the MWSBE goal requirements on the project. And so you want to start that initially. Make sure that you have a good record keeper who documents information. And so if you ever fall short, or at the closeout of the project, when if we need to review good faith efforts taken, if you happen to fall short of meeting or achieving any of the goal requirements on the project, we will definitely review those good faith efforts and take those into consideration. MWSBE is an acronym. I've heard maybe weeby. There's so many different terms and things that you'll hear, but it is defined as the Minority Women-Owned Small Business Enterprise Program. Goal-oriented projects. A goal-oriented project is a competitive competitively bid project. The goal-oriented projects are those that you'll see that has a goal requirement on it. Typically, with the projects that come through the housing department, you'll see many of those competitively bid out, and you will have a goal requirement. If you have a goal requirement on the project, that means that certified vendors that are certified through the Office of Business Opportunity will be expected to be utilized to achieve those goal requirements. So payments to those certified vendors are what you use to achieve those goal requirements. Start of work. Start of work, as it says, is what we utilize on the project documentation purposes to determine when a contractor starts on the project. A start of work notice to me is very important, because what we don't want to do in compliance is start sending out the communications or identifying something that may not be meeting the requirements of timely submissions if a contractor hasn't started work. So you want to make sure when you're working with contractors that you stress the importance of making sure that start of work notice is as accurate as possible. And if you need to update, make sure that whoever your point of contact is for compliance purposes is notified, so that we can make appropriate notes in the file records. A termination of work, just as similar. We want to make sure that when a contractor fulfills their obligations on a project, that a termination of work notice is submitted. Once we start receiving those termination of work notices, that's kind of an indicator that the project is going in the right direction, and that we can start to progress the project towards, closeout if necessary, or even just understanding where the different phases are in the project. And so make sure if a contractor concludes their obligations on a project, that you submit that information to us in a timely manner, so that we can cease and make that contractor inactive, so that they're not receiving the alerts from the systems. I'm sure if you're familiar with working on our projects, that how those alerts can be. They're automatically sent out. And so we want to make sure if a contractor, ceases any work on a project, that we have those termination of work notices on file. Post-award compliance requirements. And so this is when the award has been extended, and this is when the nails and the hammers get to swinging. And so you want to make sure that you pay close attention, so that you understand what the expectations and the requirements are for post-award compliance for MWSBE. Goal achievement. Remember that I mentioned to you all about those goal-oriented projects. You want to make sure that you pay close attention. If you're working with a contractor, or even if you're interested in working with a contractor, it's okay to ask questions. You want to make sure, especially if you're a certified vendor, that you can be of assistance to those contractors, and you can help them be of benefit to achieving those goal requirements. What you want to understand, and what sometimes is often confused, is about those various goals on a project. And so we have one MWSBE goal on the project, but there's individual goals within that goal. And so you want to make sure that you understand. And so what you'll see is it'll be advertised, for an example, as a 34% overall goal. However, there's a breakdown, and typically the breakdown can vary, but you want to just make sure that you have awareness of what those breakdowns are. So throughout the duration of project activity, if you're a prime contractor, even if you're a subcontractor, you want to make sure that if you are listed to help them achieve the goal in any way, that you are on track with meeting that percentage. And so that makes a difference when we get to the closeout evaluation. And so, as you see here in this example, the overall goal is 34%. However, there is a 24% MBE separate goal, and there is also a 10% separate goal for WBE. It could vary. You can have an SBE within that. You just want to make sure that you're paying attention to that. It's okay to ask questions up front, and please make sure, and I stress this, please make sure if you are interested in performing on any projects, that you pay close attention to the solicitation and what those advertisements detail. LCP tracker. Okay, if you're not familiar with the Housing and Community Development Department in our compliance area, LCP Tracker is a payroll reporting system. However, the contract compliance area, MWSBE, Payer Play specifically, even our DBRA team, and even Section 3, we utilize the LCP Tracker portal for submission requirements. And so they have a great feature in the system that we utilize currently, and that's for contractors to upload all of their compliance documentation. And so when the auditors come in, and we're often audited with the various funding sources that come through, we allow them access to review that information. And what we want to make sure is that the file records read like a book. And so you want to make sure that whoever's working on your team, who's responsible for uploading these documents, you want to make sure that they're familiar with the system. You want to make sure they're attending these trainings, and you want to make sure if they have any questions that you are directing them to the appropriate administrators that are responsible for these specific projects, so that we can make sure that, all of the documents are being submitted in a timely manner, and we don't have any delays in project activity or the success on the project. So now what we'll go through is, for LCP Tracker, is the contractor setup. And so unlike B2G, where it's only required for our team to add new subcontractors in the system, LCP Tracker is different. And so in LCP Tracker, the prime has the ability to add subcontractors to the project. This is very critical on our end because we want to know and make sure that we're staying abreast of any new contractors that are added to the system. Why this is important, one of the reasons is you don't want a payment draw to come up, for an example, and we identify that there are subs performing on a project that we haven't been properly notified of. And so a good rule of thumb is, if you're a prime contractor and you're adding a new subcontractor to a project, it's always a good idea to just send over a nice courtesy message to your point of contact for compliance and just let them know that a new contractor has been added into the system. That way we'll know that it's time to review those documents, if it's coming in between the month of reviews, and it'll give us an indicator that there's a new contractor that needs to be added to the B2G contract management system. Okay, what you see here is the contractor setup. It's a two-step. You'll include all of the information for that particular contractor. Make sure that you have those compliance documents submitted. It's much more easier when you have those documents versus when you may be familiar with working with a contractor and you have a lot of their compliance contacts. You want to make sure that this is the information that'll be specific for this individual project. And you want to make sure that if a contractor already has access, that you're not going in and duplicating or adding a contractor that's already in. You'll be able to go in and search that information. And so contractor setup, you'll go to add edit contractor. It's very simple. You will be able to enter that contractor information. If they already have a profile in the system, you'll see that information populated. You'll be able to confirm that that information is the same for the particular project that you are working on. If there's any differences in the contractor email, the points of contact, you will be able to confirm that before you save and upload that information for that particular project. It's very imperative, and I'll say imperative because the contact information that is uploaded, the documents that is uploaded, that's the information that we use in B2G. And what we have seen and what we don't want to see is when contractors are added to a project and we have dated information for the points of contact for compliance. And in those instances, the notifications are not being, addressed. And by the time a payment draw comes, what you'll see is that the contractor will say, we never received a notification. And you know how, federal work goes and how payments can be. And what we don't want to do is delay that. So make sure that you have the most up-to-date information for the points of contact who will be responsible for uploading that information into LCP Tracker for any of the compliance applicable programs. Here is what you'll see, the prime contractor steps to assign a contractor to a project. Don't worry about taking notes. We will share this information out to you all at the close of the presentations. It's very simple. You'll log into LCP Tracker. You'll go to the toolbar, add edit contractors, as I mentioned. If they're a new contractor, you'll select new. What you can also do, you can always search that toolbar and see if they are already added in the system. If not, you can go in and add all of those details. Remember, it's much easier when you have those compliance documents such as the contractor cover sheet, which details a lot of that information. Where you'll also go to next is the setup, and you'll click contractor assignment. This is very important because you don't want to add a contractor to a project and they're not properly set up. And so what you want to do is make sure you're tiering them correctly. Tier. And with that being said, if you're adding a contractor, they're tiered to the prime. That's very simple. But if you're adding a contractor and they're tiered to another sub, maybe you just want to make sure that you have the appropriate information so they're tiered correctly. Okay. Add new assignment, you'll make sure that you're entering that information for adding that contractor to the system. And you want to make sure that you're also entering all of the project information into those data fields and save it. It may seem like it's, information that's repetitive or that you've already entered that in, but when the auditors come and when we start pulling and generating those reports, every detail helps us in, achieving the desired results. So make sure that you are familiar with that. And if you're not familiar, reach out to us if this training doesn't provide you the information that you need, or if you have any questions in addition to what we're explaining to you. Steps to upload documents, very simple, but you want to just make sure that it's not so simple that you can make an error, right? And so you want to make sure that when you have a document that is saved to your computer, you have it saved under the, appropriate browser type. You'll upload that information, go into the system, into LCP Tracker. You'll go to add edit document, enter the required fields, and upload that document on the appropriate file name. I want to stress the document file name, because when we go with all these various compliance programs in the system and review the information to determine if you're in compliance, for an example, if I'm responsible for reviewing MWSBE and POP, I'm not going to go look in section 3 or DBRA files, okay? And I know sometimes it's easier just to upload just anywhere. That's not helpful, and that doesn't work. And when the auditors come and they want to see a particular project and they want to review a particular subcontractor, they're going to go to that file only, and they're going to look under whichever the applicable program that they're doing their testing. And so you want to make sure if you are uploading MWBE documents that it's uploaded under MWBE documents or whatever that specific appropriate document type is. You want to make sure that it's not being uploaded under a program that it's not responsible for. And so make sure that anyone that's responsible for uploading those documents are aware that we have locations and specific doc types for these various documents that are submitted, that you want to make sure that it's being uploaded appropriately. Steps to upload a document. Remember, we discussed that. You'll go to e-document. You want to make sure that those documents are already added on your computer system so that it's just easier for you to upload that information. Here is where we mentioned where you'll put in all that information if it's not already there. If it's there, you'll be able to find that particular contractor. You want to confirm with the documents that they've submitted to you that there's been no changes or updates to any of the compliance information. And where you'll go next, this is what I mentioned. We have, specific areas and doc types. And so in the compliance form package that we share with everyone, you'll be able to see where those particular documents are expected to go. And I've heard it all. I know that when you go into the system, you can see that there's so many different doc types. And unfortunately, historically in LCP Tracker, since we have, older doc types and we've made so many advances in the system, we aren't able to remove those older folders. And so you'll still see those, but you want to make sure you key in and pay close attention to the doc types that we have identified here. And so when you go in to upload that information, make sure that you're putting that information under the appropriate area and the appropriate doc type. Document description guide, again, here's even further detail of where those documents are responsible and are expected to go. If you have any questions about that, please make sure that you reach out to your administrator for the compliance area that you have the applicability of that particular project type. I always say that it's simple, but I know for someone who may not be familiar with working on City of Houston projects with the housing department, it may not be as simple initially. However, we do keep our ears to the streets, and so if you see anything or if you think of anything that you think would be helpful in making the contractors' lives easier, feel free to shoot us a message. We're always looking to improve, and we're always looking to make it as easy as possible for you all, so it's as easy as possible for us to continue, maintaining compliance on all of these various programs. I want to just mention the shared compliance form. Of course, we have several programs that look at and require many of the same forms. And so, for an example, the compliance cover sheet, a start of work notice or a termination of work notice, or even a letter of explanation. Those are shared forms. And so you will upload those under the shared documents because there's not a particular area that reviews that information. We all utilize that. And so you want to just make sure simple little things like that, that you keep that in mind when you're doing your uploads. Single family only documents. So many of our contractors, work on single family projects. And so for single family, we have a few documents that may or may not be required. And so you want to make sure that you pay close attention to that. We've tried to reduce, the amount of paperwork as much as possible. However, we do have an obligation and we do have requirements that we have to make sure that we have supporting records for. And so you want to make sure that you pay close attention to that. If you're performing on single family projects, there are some documents that are only required to be submitted at one time throughout the program, right? And that's so you don't have to, for every address, submit these same documents over and over. So we have a good tracking system where we're able to track that information and monitor that throughout the program life. And so if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to your contract administrator for single family activities. B2G now payment reporting and the participation tracker. B2G is our contract management system, especially when it comes to tracking the participation on the projects, the payments on the project. B2G has advanced so much from when I started with the city 10 years ago. And so I absolutely enjoy it. And if you're familiar with working with the city, you can see, and I'm sure you've seen all of the various features and you get the alerts of, how it's continuing to advance. And so from Section 3 to MWSBE, they speak to each other, and LCP Tracker and B2G are actually sister companies. And so we're just hoping and hopeful that one day we'll wake up and be able to see, everything that goes into LCP Tracker be seen in B2G. But until then, we are responsible for entering the information for subcontractors into B2G. And I can see why that is. And that's because it deals with a lot of the financials. It talks with SAP. And so for many of our projects, SAP populates that information into B2G. And you're responsible as a contractor working on the project, even if you're a prime, a subcontractor, or a lower tier sub. You are responsible for making sure that your payments are being confirmed on a monthly basis in a timely manner. This is for certified and non-certified firms. And so if you're interested in working on a City of Houston project, you want to make sure that you have your logins active. You want to make sure that you're familiar with navigating through that system. So when payments are entered and made to your company, for an example, that you're able to go in and confirm that. If you have any lower tiers throughout the project life that you want to add to a project, you want to make sure that you have the ability to go in and properly add them to the system so you're properly tiered in the system. Okay, MWSBE coordinator is assigned to all of the projects, and so they're going to be responsible for going in and reviewing that information and making sure that you stay on track to meeting those goal requirements. And even if there's not a goal requirement on the project, we're still obligated by these federal rules to make sure that every contractor that's performing on the project have certain documentation on file. And certain documentation is even making sure that those contractors are in the B2G system, and we're being able to track the participation. Okay, the prime is responsible for entering the payments to the subcontractors within 5 days of payment receipt from the city. And the subcontractors, suppliers, professional service providers, all of you all are required to confirm those payments in the system in a timely manner. Now, when you have those contractors that are just so busy and they can't do it in a timely manner, it can be tedious for us because we have to go through for each of those payments when you miss the deadline and extend that reporting period. And so help us help you by making sure that you're going in and confirming those payments in a timely manner. Automated compliance audit process. And so, like I mentioned to you all, SAP populates that information over. The prime is notified of that payment. The prime enters payments for those subs. When they make payments to the subcontractor is notified via email. The subcontractor confirms or rejects those payments. Something that I like about the payments in B2G is that you can put confirmation details. And so you know how it is in the contractor world. You know, there may be someone who is, not accepting that, yeah, I received, for an example, $100,000 payment in April. Maybe they didn't receive $100,000 payment in April because the prime maybe missed the reporting period for March, and so they group March and April payment together. That's when those details come in handy. So make sure when you're entering those payments in that you include as much detail as possible. There's a note field where you can put in additional comments and notes about the payment. I like when I see it and they put the payment check number. Those details are very imperative, especially when there's any, confusion on a project or if there's any discrepancies about payment reporting. The compliance audit summary, big deal. You want to make sure that you're always reviewing that information. We'll go into further detail in regards to what we look for with that. You want to make sure that if a subcontractor rejects a payment, that the contractor and the prime communicate with each other so that they can get that information resolved. Definitely include your point of contact for compliance so we can make sure that we all stay in the loop. Access to contracts in B2G. I say it's simple, right? You want to make sure, but first you have to make sure that you have your access, your user access. If you don't have user access, reach out to one of us, reach out to myself or your point of contact for compliance. I encourage everyone to follow that chain of command. And so if you have a point of contact, reach out to them and let them know if you don't have access, or if you have a contractor that's interested in getting access to the system. If they need to add a new user, reach out to us so that we can make sure that you have that. In order to access the system, you must have login. And so you'll enter your login credentials. You'll be able to go to the dashboard and click on any contracts that you have available. If you have multiple, that's fine. You want to click on that specific one that you're going into the system reporting for. Next, you'll be able to go to, the payment process. And what you see here is what it looks like from the prime's end, right? When they log in, the prime can go in to report individual payments, or they can report payments to all of their subcontractors at once. And so the city, this system has gotten very advanced. And so, like I said, we listen to you all and this is helpful. And so you just want to make sure that you're able to go in a timely manner within 5 business days, as we mentioned to you all, and enter those payments in for those subcontractor. You can see where it says payment detail, where you can put the check number. You can even attach uploads. I see those very outstanding contractors that go in and they actually attach the files as proof. I like it. That shows me that they have experience and they've seen everything that you can see in the contractor world. So sometimes it's just better to go on and have that proof. And so if anyone disputes a payment or has, a discrepancy, they'll already have that supporting documentation as proof. Payment confirmation. This is what's key. You want to make sure that those subcontractors have, as I mentioned, someone on their team that'll go in and confirm those payments in a timely manner. We appreciate that. Just like you all appreciate us releasing those payments in a timely manner, we appreciate when you all go in and have your subcontractors, aware before they begin on the project that this is a monthly requirement. And so as those payments are entered into the system, you want to make sure that those subcontractors are going in and confirming those payments. Compliance form packet. Okay, so now this is when, you're on a project, you're working, the nails and hammers are swinging, and this is where the compliance requirements come in, and we get to, giving you that monthly report on if you're doing an exceptional job or if there's some areas that need improvement. You want to make sure you pay very close attention to this information because this impacts us all. There's not one subcontractor or one prime that can do it for everyone. Every individual contractor, starting from the prime on down, makes a difference in if you are remaining in compliance or not. And so you want to make sure, if you need to nudge a contractor, if they're busy, if they're on vacation, you want to make sure that you let them know that it's imperative that they're performing and doing what's expected of them at all times, so that there's no reason to delay project activity for the entire project. And so we have annual documents such as that conflict of interest form. That is a very important form. We want to make sure that those performing on these projects don't have a conflict, right? These are federal dollars that we, extend out. Texas Controllers, the bar list. We want to make sure that everyone's in good grace and are able to and eligible to receive these funds. And so that DeBar list, I have seen it over the years not grow at all too extensive. And so even though you'll go in and you'll see the same one or two or few DeBar people on the list for Texas, you want to make sure that you have that time stamp so that when those auditors come, they'll know that we're requiring this information on an annual basis. The request for contractor clearance form, that SAM verification is one of two. You don't do one without the other. That request for contractor clearance form is an annual document, that SAM verification, where you'll go in and you're going to check it based on the company name, the principal owners, and the EIN number. What I'm going to mention to you all is one of the new big requirements. It's a UEI number that's required for those registered in the SAM system. But you want to make sure that you're at the minimum, that you're verifying their eligibility based on the company name, the principal owners, and the EIN number. And those three separate searches are what's expected for each contractor performing on a project. If you submit one without the other, you'll be rejected. And so just make sure that everyone knows before they begin performing on a project, or before they even get a good interest in performing with the city, make sure that they understand that we check and verify to make sure they're eligible to perform on these federally funded projects. Recurring documents, the monthly utilization plans, and that's for certified and non-certified firms. And I'm going to tell you as the manager why that's so imperative that we receive that. When the auditors come and they test us and they want to know who performed on this project between, January 1 through April 30th. Not only can we tell them that, hey, we went to site visits and these are the contractors each time we went out for the site visits on a monthly basis, but we'll be able to show them on that monthly utilization plan that you all submit to us. We'll be able to show them as supporting proof that these are the individuals that perform for those individual months, and this is the documentation that we have. And so you want to make sure that you're providing that information and you're submitting that information in a timely manner, and that is for the certified and non-certified firms. The form has gotten so advanced now, if you don't have any yourselves performing on a project, or if you didn't perform during that month, you can simply check a box and you can submit that information. You know what I'll even accept? I'll even accept if you went from January to April, you did vacation, you can put on that particular form, this is from January 1, 2026 through May 1, 2026 of no activity, or the same activity. We will accept that even as well. But you want to make sure that it's detailed enough to where we understand when we open it, as well as the auditors when we read it, that that information is what it is. And that's not always the case, but I'm just saying whatever we could do to help you, help us, we're here to support you. Recurring documents, the utilization schedule, the utilization plan, the cover sheet, the utilization schedule. I want to make sure that you all understand, if you ever fall short of meeting the MWSBE goal, we're going to send you a not meeting the goal letter. And I can't stress that enough. You want to make sure that that point of contact that's listed in B2G for the prime, you want to make sure that they have good access and they communicate in a timely manner, because what we're going to want to see is a new updated utilization schedule that tells us a projection of how you plan to get back on track towards meeting that goal. What OBO does not like at the end of the project, we're responsible for sharing all of that information, because now, they have the penalties and the suspensions. And so there's a lot of opportunities coming up, and you don't want to be one to cause your company to miss out on the opportunities because you have failed to respond in a timely manner and you have failed to achieve the goal because you're not staying on track of that. So if you have a contract that's expected to do 10% of, the MWBE, or if you have a contractor that's expected to do 4% SBE, that's based on payments, and those are only percentages. And so you want to make sure that you're, staying abreast of this information and monitoring that on a regular basis. The compliance cover sheet, there must be one on file for every contractor that's performing on the project, no exceptions. The compliance cover sheet is what we utilize in B2G to add that information in. So you want to make sure that we have that information is accurate. If there's any changes, you want to make sure that we get those updated so that we'll know who's responsible for the compliance on the project. Remember, we mentioned that request for contractor clearance form. There's no exceptions at all. We have to have that. We do not want you performing on the federal projects if you're not eligible to perform on these projects. Start of work, termination of work, we mentioned those. We want to make sure that before we start sending you these regular reminders that you have actually started work, right? And we also understand when it says to be determined. And so you have a latter date. So you have contractors who may not, start into the end of the project. They may not do, they may only be doing landscaping or roofing. And we know that that's not going to occur to maybe later down. We want to just make sure that we're not, putting on the monthly, compliance reports that you're in non-compliance and you haven't even started work on the project. That termination of work notice, remember, it's just equal. We want to make sure when you complete your obligation on the project that we have that information, and so that we're not continuing to send you information about confirming payments and where's your monthly utilization plan if you're not even performing on the project. Okay. Executed contract agreements. Make sure that those contract agreements are executed. Make sure that it has payment details, make sure it's dated and signed, and make sure that it includes that mediation clause for any of those certified vendors that are performing on the project, especially those that are included in GO requirements. You want to make sure that for any certified firm on the project, that's one of our thank yous for being certified. The Office of Business Opportunity will host or facilitate a mediation if it's necessary, but we want to make sure that that clause is included. That SAM's verification, remember, company name, principal owners, and EIN number. We're going to do that on an annual basis. You're going to do that for every contract that's performing on a project, along with the Texas Comptroller DeBar vendor list. Okay. So if you have any question about those documents, remember, you got annual documents, you have the recurring documents, and you also have the one-time documents, which is what I mentioned: the termination of work, the start of works, the executed contract agreements, the DeBar vendor list, the request for contractor clearance. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. We just need to make sure that we have that information on record so that we can be successful on the project. The utilization schedule, remember that I mentioned to you all about how that works. The utilization schedule is a forecast. It tells you, how you're going to meet the goal requirements on a month-to-month basis. No matter what type of project you work on, we have a template for that. It has formulas already imputed into those into those documents. And so you don't have to worry about anything but entering what contractor is going to work on the project. And you're gonna make sure that not only are you putting in what contractor is performing on the project, you're gonna put an estimate of those payments, and on a month-to-month basis, it'll give us a projection to show us, even if they fell short this month, they'll be back on track for the next month. Okay, compliance cover sheet, simple information. We want to know details about the company. Remember, this is what we utilize to go put the information into B2G if it's a new contractor, or even if it's an existing contractor. That contractors have various, points of contact and users. We want to make sure for these individual projects that we have the appropriate information. Okay, here's an example of what's acceptable. Here's an example of what's not acceptable. You want to make sure that these forms are being completed into their entirety. You also want to make sure, I always stress this, in any communication, if you ever communicate with me, I always have that 46 contract number somewhere included in the email so that I can identify what project you're working on. Okay? Make sure that this form is completed to its entirety. This is an example. I know this information may seem repetitive, but you'll be surprised at how useful this information is, especially when the auditors are in our face or in the office. New requirement. And so I have been waiting to share this. I've sent out blast communication, but I want to also make sure that everyone is aware that the UEI requirement is not a new requirement. I remember back in 2022, I sent this information out when the feds came out with the requirement, when we did away with the DUNS number. It replaces that. You want to make sure that for any contractor performing on the project, they're registered with SAMS. Automatic registration gets them a UEI number. We need this information to make sure that they are eligible to perform on the project. And so what the City of Houston Housing Department is doing, not only do we get a post-award for those prime contractors, for those developers, at the earliest phase, we have a team that's responsible for getting that information and tracking that. We also have for post-award now included on the subcontractor clearance form, we have a new field that UEI number is required. If they don't have a UEI number, I don't care how great of work they do, they're not able to perform on our projects until we can verify that they have a UEI number. And so make sure that you have verified that information before you get it to us. Like I mentioned, we have a early on pre-award process during the procurement. We actually have contract compliance pre-award area where that is also any anticipated contractors that you have listed on those participation plans, on those letters of intent. Now we track that information at that phase. And so don't delay the process. Go on and start letting, any contractors that do good, that does good work that you're interested in performing with currently or even going forward. On those grandfather projects, we understand if it's 80% or more, we are expecting to have that information on file and readily available. For new contracts that are coming up effective May 1st, it must be on file. Okay, so make sure that you spread the word that now, and we're not making these rules up. When we get audited and tested, and as the feds continue to develop out ways to make sure that our money is staying within, the United States, we want to make sure that we are showing that we're being good stewards and we're following the rules. And so that's one of the rules now that we have. And so make sure that a UEI number is valid and you're able to verify that before you list them to perform on our projects, because if it's not able to be verified, they're not able to perform on the project and no contract can be executed. SAM verification, remember we mentioned that you're going to go through SAMS.gov. You're going to make sure that you're doing the 3 searches, and that's the full company name, the principal owners, and the employee identification number. 3 searches are what we're going to expect to be included and uploaded into LCP Tracker for each of those subcontractors. How to retrieve that information. Here are the screenshots to show you how you can sign in and go in and search that information. It's very simple, not hard at all. You just want to make sure that you're able to go in and navigate through that header menu of the page and select the information that you need to verify that. And they have simple, you see here where they have the various fields where you can just go in, click the information and enter particular information so that you can search those details and you can save the results. Oftentimes you'll see it's hundreds of pages, the first 3 or 4 pages that show us that there's no exclusion on file will suffice. How you retrieve that SAM verification, remember you can't do one without the other. So you're going to complete that subcontractor clearance form, and you're going to also attach that those results. If any exact match is identified for the contractor, subcontractor, or lower tier subcontractor, they will not be eligible to conduct any business on our federal projects. Any partial matches will need to be verified by our office, and additional information will likely be requested. And so you want to make sure that you're doing a complete search. It's best to just be upfront with us and let us know so that we can help you help us, right? And so if additional information is needed, that's we see that, sometimes where you have similar names. And so we may ask for additional, identification just to make sure that that's not the exact same owner, for an example. Non-debarment, remember I mentioned to you all how that looks. And so you want to make sure that when you go through the controller's office, that you do that search, make sure that you stamp that so that we know that it's being done on an annual basis. Okay. You'll go in Controller's Office. That's the link you'll go to. Scroll down to Procurement Resources and click Search. You'll search that vendor name, and we'll be able to see within those results that they're not one that's included on the debarred list. You'll be able to also click on the debarred vendor list on the left side. They have advanced a lot. All these systems have, and so hopefully it's more helpful to you so that you'll be able to see that. And when you click search, you'll be able to see what those are and identify that those are not, that particular contractor is not anyone that's included on that debarred list. You can print, save it to PDF. Make sure that you timestamp it and make sure that you upload that in LCP Tracker under annual contractor verification document. Remember, that's required on an annual basis. Here's an example of what's not acceptable and what is acceptable. And you'll be able to see that it has the timestamp date on that, so we'll know when you actually pulled that information. If you see here where it says last uploaded, you want to make sure that that's included on there. Conflict of interest, remember I mentioned that. It's very, very, very imperative that we have a conflict of interest on file for every contractor performing on a project. and I explain it a lot of times and make it clear. So you don't want to, get awarded $1 million and then they come back and take your check back because there was a conflict identified. You want to let us know up front so that we can make sure that everyone knows that there was no funny business in the way you received that blessing. And so make sure that you identify that information, make sure you complete the conflict of interest form to its entirety. There's a difference, and I want to make sure that you understand this. I know that now I'm responsible and we're responsible for various areas of compliance. You see where it says completed by business entity for the contractors performing on the project. You want to make sure that you're completing the appropriate conflict of interest form. This one says completed by business entities. We have another one for our subrecipients. It says completed by non-federal entities. If you are one of the subrecipients, please make sure that you're completing the appropriate form, and that is the one for non-federal entities. If you are a contractor performing, a subcontractor performing on a project, remember to complete the conflict of interest form for business entities. Okay. Here's an example of what it looks like completed and not completed correctly. You need to make sure that it's signed and dated. Please make sure that you don't go past the for program staff use area because that's where we'll be able to conduct and complete our additional review. Start of work notice here and now what we'll go through is just showing you what it looks like. And so start of work notice, and we're showing you how simple it is. Just include the information and make sure that you include what that date will be. If you need to update it, feel free to just, send a revised copy or send us a courtesy email to let us know. That utilization plan, remember I mentioned how that is on a monthly basis. And remember I mentioned you can just click a button and say there was no lower tier subs, no activity performed. You can put that date amount in it, and if you need to put in the field in bold, this is for January through April. If you had the same activity, as long as we have that information, we'll be able to use that as supporting records. Here's where you'll see an example of not self-performing. That's where you'll have the details of those that are performing under your contract as the prime or as a subcontractor if you have lower tier subs. And here's if you're self-performing. You're saying you're self-performing. I don't have any additional contractors performing on the project. Contract agreements. Remember, this is very imperative. A contract agreement has to be executed and on file for every contractor that's performing on a project. And remember, we need the scope of work, the contract amount, signatures, and dates for both the prime and the subcontractors. And remember, if there's a certified firm performing on the project, if they're certified, a mediation clause must be included within that executed agreement. Here's an example of what that mediation clause looks like. We share that information with you. It just basically details that the Office of Business Opportunity, the City of Houston, will support you if mediation is necessary throughout the life of the project. And so you just want to make sure that you fill that in. Oftentimes we just see it blank, put the name, I'm sure a lot of people don't know, but where those blank fields are, put the name of the contractor or supplier that's performing on the project. Remember, that's for certified firms. If you're certified working on the project, right? Certified vendors through the Office of Business Opportunity. Termination of work, I think we have established how important that is. Make sure that it's completed to its entirety. Work on hold notices. And so work on hold notices are only applicable to DBRA. However, it's still very important. If you have a reason to not have activity going on, things happen. It's the construction world. Just make sure that you have that uploaded and make sure that you include that in the appropriate doc type, under the appropriate doc type. Single family prime contractor requirements. Remember, we mentioned it may vary a little bit from our multifamily project activities. And so we want to make sure that we have a cover sheet, a utilization plan, start of work and termination of work for every address, right? And we want to make sure that all contractors, including those lower tier subcontractors and firms performing on a project, they're also required to submit a monthly utilization plan for every address, okay? A request for subcontractor clearance, the SAM, that's only required one time throughout the life of the program. We know these programs could go on for years, but we just want to make sure that we have that on file, and it's on file at least once throughout the program. If a contractor has not previously worked on the program or has not been verified through SAMS.gov, then the contractor is eligible to perform on federal projects. We will make sure that that's required and that that's on file. Single family, here's an example. ABC Company, you see those are two different addresses. What's going to be required on an annual basis? Remember, we said their request for contractor clearance, their debar, and their conflict of interest form, right? Also, we have those regular documents on a monthly basis that we have the regular documents, the start of work notice, the compliance cover sheet, the utilization plans, a contract agreement, and the termination of work, right? And you see for the next address, you're going to also need the exact same information, right? We just want to make sure that we know who's performing each month. If you have a compliance cover sheet, you upload that exact same cover sheet. If it's the same information for that particular address, then you just upload that into the system. A deviation request. This is very important. I want to make sure that you all understand, for any contractor that's certified and that's going to be accredited towards goal achievement, a deviation request must be on file if you want to deviate at all. Deviation means that you are going to deviate from that initial participation plan. What we're going to need in writing is who, what, when, and why. Who you want to remove, why you want to remove them, when you want to remove them. We're going to also need to make sure that if you replace, for an example, an MBE firm, that you are going to replace them with a MBE firm within that same next type, and for that exact same percentage or even more. We want to just make sure that you are following the rules, and what we want to make sure is that you're not limiting that participation for any contractors. And so make sure that you send that, as soon as possible. They'll have 5 business days to respond. If you're removing a contractor, it's not always as bad as it appears. Sometimes a contractor just may be too busy to perform as they intended, or, due to the economy, they can't perform at the price that was initially negotiated. Understandable. Find a new contractor, solicit the information out. If you need us to help you, share the information about a new opportunity, let us know and we'll help you. But we have to know this information and it has to be on file and recorded. Okay. Ongoing monitoring. We conduct monthly site visits randomly. Make sure everyone knows that. Please don't run when we come out. We are wanting to make sure that everyone's getting paid correctly. We want to observe what's going on the site. We want to make sure that we know who's actually on the site, subcontractor wise. And so just make sure that everyone knows that we'll be coming out, and on a regular basis, we'll be submitting reports, compliance status reports, by the 5th calendar day of each month. Right now we have a lot of changes that are going on. And so if you need anything, if you have any questions in regards to MWBE or pay or play for single family activities or professional service activities or public service projects, feel free to reach out to me at any time. This is what the compliance status reports look like. It's very detailed. Sometimes it'll have no red. Red is a red flag for me. That's what I'll look at when they ask me if I recommend release of a payment. And so you want to make sure that you're paying close attention to this. Make sure you share that with your subcontractors on a regular basis so that they understand, anything that's pending or not in compliance. Commercially used for function audits with MWSBE. This is a mandatory requirement. And so we want to make sure that every certified firm performing on the project is performing a commercially useful project. We want to make sure that they're performing in the certified NAICS code that they were certified in. And so what this means is that I want to come out and make sure that if you have a roofer, that they're performing roofing services, not electrical services. And so we will be conducting CUF audits just as well as when we come out and conduct those site visits. And so make sure your contractors are aware, make sure their employees are aware that we may take a minute or two of their time to ask a few questions. Contractor performance on the projects, red flags. I think I've mentioned these. Hey, submit a deviation request if you need to remove a contractor for gold credit, right? Make sure that if you are, have a contractor that's not submitting documents in a timely manner, that we get them off of the project if they can't, correct their actions, because it's imperative that we get this information. Making sure prime contractors are submitting those monthly payments, because we have audits to do on the projects, and these subcontractors want to be able to confirm that they're being paid. Making sure that you are demonstrating good faith efforts to meet the goal requirements. And so if we set up a meeting, we want to make sure that you, schedule time to meet and talk if we need to. Substantial non-compliance. Please make sure you spread the word that we have the leverage to withhold payment. And payment withholding is not only for that subcontractor that is not performing up to standard. It's for the whole project. Termination of a contract, if it consists, if it's persistent, if you don't get it right, we can recommend that the project or your contract be terminated. Please make sure you all include that in contracts with any of these subcontractors, that compliance is a part of breaching the contract. Suspension debarment. The city is doing great at enforcing penalties and suspensions now on projects. And so you want to make sure that you're not on that list. Closeout evaluations are very imperative. Make sure you, stay mindful of the information I share with you all in regards to meeting those goal requirements and remaining in compliance. Pending closeout activities, we can't close out a project if the compliance audit list has any red or unconfirmed payments or incomplete payments. Make sure that you're doing that every month. When I send out the CSRs, I include those compliance audits so that you can see that, and so that you can see if there's any outstanding or incomplete payments. Project closeout and evaluation. You will be evaluated and rated based on your compliance achievement with the goal and with compliance submissions. Here are some reference links and resources if you have any questions regarding any of the information that we discussed. If there are any questions, please put those in the chat. If not, I greatly appreciate your attendance and I look forward to working with you.